our next and final panel for tonight. I want to thank everyone for staying engaged and staying connected. This is important work. We've got to get out this vote in 2020. We've got to stay engaged. We've got to support and protect one another. And our final panel is about the history and revitalization of Indiana Avenue, of the historic Indiana Avenue. And so we have a historian, we have a public design um, official as well as academic, and we also have an activist who are joining us for this final panel tonight. We have with us David Williams, who is a professor, an activist, and historian, and the author of Jazz on Indianapolis Avenue and Indianapolis Rhythm and Blues, his latest book that came out in 2017. We have Justin Garrett Moore, who is the executive director of the New York City Public Design Commission, who is also an adjunct professor of design and public policy at Columbia University and at Morgan State University. And finally, and last but definitely not least, we have one of our most engaging activists and fighters for justice and social change here in the city of Indianapolis, the former president of the Ransom Place Neighborhood Association, a longstanding member and activist around community development and historic preservation, and was recently quoted in the Indianapolis Star about the redevelopment of the Madam C.J. Walker Theater and Center. And so we are going to invite these final panelists to come in and talk to us a little bit about, can this staple, meaning Indiana Avenue, be reclaimed and revitalized? Can we make an argument for being culturally insistent and making sure that we can do the work that needs to be done? I'm going to make you all co-host so that you can turn on your cameras, and then we are going to move the other folks. Thank you, Representative Pryor. Back to the attendees, and we thank you so much for all that you've done. There you are. It is great to see you, Justin. Welcome to the call. I know it's late, but welcome. And I want to see Ms. Brooks. Can you turn on your camera? How are you doing, Ms. Brooks? Welcome.
I'm doing good.
And I'm trying to see, I'm hoping that Mr. Williams, Professor Williams, David is still here. But if he is not yet, let's get started with this conversation. I know that Justin and Ms. Brooks, that you know each other. I don't know who wants to jump in first, but I'm gonna back out and let y'all start this. Can we reclaim, revitalize, and really redistribute the power and the economic importance of places like Indiana Avenue and our historic Black communities in this current moment?
I will defer to Paula to go first, and she's on the ground there first.
Yes, the short answer is yes. The long answer is that we need to come with a powerful voice, the Black community here in Indianapolis, to say that Indiana Avenue is our home, it's our root. There's been Black people on the Avenue since the 1830s, so we're talking about almost 200 years, and that we're not gonna allow the city, IUPUI, and other institutions and developers especially to determine the character of Indiana Avenue, of the Near West Side. But it will not happen unless the Black community just stands up and say, basically, no mas, no more. That's it in a nutshell. Yes. Short answer is yes.
Yes, we can reclaim it, and then we're going to go. Justin, jump in. I want you to talk about Yeah, can we reclaim it? And then Justin and Miss Brooks, tell us how we reclaim it. What do we need to be doing right now at this particular moment? Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, so I'm actually sharing my screen here, and I wanted to talk about this idea of reclaiming and the purposes and the background of that. And so this is something called the Black Space Manifesto. It's something that's been generated by a group of Black urbanists from all over the country, and I'm a member of that, and there are a few there in Indianapolis. And this idea of reclaiming is really important because we have to acknowledge the importance of our Black spaces. Yeah. Right. So we just had an incredible panel and conversation about our politics, right? The kind of our collective community exercising their power. But one of the most important ways that we exercise our power is by forming community in place and holding space. So in the Black Space Manifesto, there are a few kind of key principles or ideas that I think are important to talk about as we're thinking about how our cities are changing, how our communities are facing challenges, and especially now when we're in the midst of the pandemic and protests, facing kind of a historical reckoning that has connected, frankly, a very kind of new and young generation to the importance of things that have happened in the past. And so we have to think about different thoughts, like creating circles, not lines, right? How do we kind of build and create community and not necessarily convert to sort of traditions of hierarchies? How do we move at the speed of trust? And this is a very important one, especially when we talk about Indiana Avenue. So many of the actions that have happened there over time haven't had that ability to kind of move at a speed that the community can accommodate. Or we can talk about positive things like celebrating, catalyzing, and amplifying Black joy, right? What are the things that are positive about our spaces and our people and our community that we want to honor and to invest in? But we also want to make sure that we reckon with the past to build the future. And this is one of the most important points. I'm going to read it quickly. It says, meaningfully acknowledge the histories, injustice, innovations, and victories of spaces and places before new work begins. Reckon with the past as a means of healing, building trust, and deepening understanding of self and others. And so when we talk about Indiana Avenue, I just wanted to sort of kind of prompt that basically all Black people in Indianapolis have a connection to Indiana Avenue, one way or another. This was an Instagram post that I did where my father's done a lot of family history, and he did some research on his grandfather, so my great-grandfather, who was born into slavery in Tennessee, but he eventually made his way north to Indianapolis, and he lived at 427 Agnes Street. And so, when he's kind of moving to Indianapolis, he's going to this territory. He's living in this neighborhood that had homes and businesses. That red arrow kind of shows, the little house where he lived. This is an aerial photo. But what happened over time was that community was erased. Ghosted in here is the footprint of new buildings from IUPUI that now exist on what was once where people like my great-grandfather lived, right? And so there was this massive erasure of the Black community in Indianapolis, and that was done by design, right? So there was this whole community, this whole place, businesses, homes, families, schools, all of this kind of activity that was the heart of the Black community in Indianapolis. And this is an image, an atlas map from 1929. So, kind of right after the Walker Building was constructed. And so today, this is this triangle, right? West Street and Indiana Avenue. So everyone knows the Walker Building, the triangle, this sort of big thing. But this entire space around the Walker Building was the Black community. It wasn't just that building or the Urban League. There was an entire community. There was a fabric here that was destroyed and erased intentionally. And we have to remember that the Walker Building, it remains, it's extant, it's an institution that we invest in, but the Avenue wasn't the Walker Building. right? The avenue were all these businesses. Down here, here's the canal on the right side of this map, the 500 block. That's really where kind of the hubbub and the activity. The Walker Building was sort of by itself, to be honest, right? So all this activity in businesses and homes, people could walk to the barber shops and the stores and all of that. You know, the YMCA was all here, right? So there was this activity and energy of a community that was the heart of Indiana Avenue that we know had the culture in place, right? And so this is a map from the 1938 Negro study of Indianapolis that was used to do a lot of kind of important work, including the great work that was referenced earlier at Flannery House for how this Black community was going to build. But again, this was a community, this was a fabric that was over time erased, right? These are over the years as Indiana avenues being erased constantly, right? Parking lots, apartment buildings, institutions, roads and highways, monorails. So all of these things are sort of replacing what was once a community. And something that is really important to take advantage of our time now and why we talk about reclaim is that there's a moment that we're all going through, right? Locally, nationally, and even globally, to think about people and place in a different way. And so you all sort of know about the Black Lives Matter mural, working with groups like Indy 10 and local artists in the city and reclaiming spaces like Indiana Avenue through their action, but through their bodies and through their work. And so when we were talking about that, it's like, what is our personal connection to these places? Why are all these people coming back here to Indiana Avenue, which is, other than the Walker Building, basically a bunch of parking lots for IUPUI? And this is a drawing from when I was in the second grade. My mom used to work in the Walker Building. And so as a kid, we would go to Walker Building, and this is me, second grade me, talking about going to the Walker Building. I couldn't spell yet. And knowing that this was an important part of my place, right? So even though I didn't grow up when Indiana Avenue was buzzing with the jazz clubs and all of that, it's still a part of my place. And so there's the Reclaim Indiana Avenue effort that is to really get us to connect to that. What is the diverse coalition of people and stakeholders that are connected to Indiana Avenue? How do we preserve our history, but then how do we push against sort of other visions for that space, right? This is kind of outside vision, apartment buildings, speculative real estate development, right? That's leaving out so much of this history that's really important. And so it's important for us to kind of work together and talk today about what is our vision, right? What is the community's ideas about that place? And I would guess that for most people, it's not this, right? Just a big hulking apartment building that isn't connected to that history and to Black people. So we want people to get involved, have a call to action, and I'll turn it back over to Paula, but I just wanted to give that context for work and how we connect people to place.
Paula, I wanted you just to talk about how do we get the community activated in response to what Justin just highlighted, this systematic erasure, these alternate visions that are not visions of Black folks and Black community, like, you know, like the Project 719. How do we get the community activated, and what are you suggesting that we do? And then I want to call David into this conversation, Professor Williams, to talk a little bit about this history that's also been erased. I mean, we see the buildings erased, we see the footprint erased, but there's also this vibrant music and cultural and aesthetic history that's also lost. So Paula, tell us about Ms. Brooks, how we can energize the community, and then Professor Williams, connect us back, draw these strands together for us.
As Justin mentioned, just about any Black person that's native to Indianapolis has a generational connection with the Avenue. And, you know, it's been interesting for me because I'm not old enough to remember the jazz clubs and all that area, but I do remember the Avenue being a place that we would go buy our food, hang out. I saw all the Black movies in the 70s there. I was not old enough, but we would go there on the weekends, me and my girlfriends, and we would go and watch Superfly and the Mac and Cleopatra Jones. But it was a place that was part of our neighborhood and we were safe. And then when I talk with younger people, they don't have any memory of the Avenue at all. It's like this mystical place here in Indianapolis that was Black and it's no longer Black. And so I actually have to kind of walk a fine line. I have to remember that the Avenue now is really for the youth, for the younger people. It's not really for the older people. The older people, for the most part, are basically gotten beat up. Over the years, over the decades of just seeing, and it was not really a slow erasure. That demolition happened in about a span of 3 years, the total demolition of the buildings. But then you had people who pushed back. You had people who came into our neighborhood and like Miss Jean Spears, who was a preservationist, and she did not grow up over here, but her parents did. And she felt like that she had something to offer to the neighborhood, and she actually taught us to love where we are, love our heritage. And I think that's the key. For Black Indianapolis, we have a relationship with ourselves that's not necessarily as positive as it could be. We do not value ourselves. And then the white structure, they don't value us at all. For instance, the not the board president, but the Walker board representative that was quoted in the paper, yes. She was just saying, well, it's nothing there. The developers say that it's nothing there, but when I talk to young people, they have a vision. They see something there. They still feel that energy. And I think that that's what we have to build on. We have to build on that generational memory as well, and work through that trauma that we've all kind of been beaten down with. And then we have to stand firm. We just have to say, no, this is not going to happen. And so in terms of organizing, you have to play to everyone's motivations. You have to find out what makes people move. And so, for instance, people that didn't grow up here, that come here, a lot of times they come from places that there are Black spaces, and there's no Black spaces here at all, that you can really feel safe in. So you can garner that energy as well. So it's just not one way or one method to motivate people. You really have to play to everyone's desires and needs. And it's not easy. No, I can tell you that.
You are doing the work on the ground, and we thank you for that. I mean, that you're speaking to multiple groups and engaging, across generation, devoting your time and energy, and that is, we don't recognize that enough. And I want to, publicly thank you for that work and for your commitment. I want to call in Professor Williams just for a moment, Ms. Brooks.
Okay, I just wanted to say something.
Yep, go ahead.
What motivates me to do this work is the fact that people like my mother, who refused to leave. She owned her home, so she was not forced out, but she refused to leave the neighborhood. She worked for pennies, and if she did not stay here, there would not be a Ransom Place, or there would not be a Near West Side. So I want to honor that, and I think that there's other people who can relate to that. Yeah. We have to honor not the famous, but the salt of the earth types of people. That they're the ones that really hold up the legacy. So I just wanted to say that.
What was your mother's name?
Violet.
Violet. Yes. I mean, and we've heard and we've learned in these years, and we've always done this. We've got to call the names of our ancestors. We got to call the name
True.
of our community leaders. We got to call the famous and those who, whose names will never be written in history books. And that's part of what we do
Yes.
in this organization, is that we want to tether both of those stories. We don't want to just highlight the ones that make the front cover of the newspaper,
Right.
but we want to highlight all of those actions that bring us together. Um, let me
Thank you.
let me bring in Professor Williams to just talk a little bit about that cultural history and corridor that was and continues to be Indiana Avenue. If you can give us some context and some color, that would be great, Professor Williams. I don't know if you can turn on your camera, but I did give you permission to do that.
No, I can't turn on my camera now, and I don't. I'm looking at the information below. I can't turn on my camera, but can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay. Yes, I was born and raised in the Lockfield Gardens back in the day, and what's so sad about it was that while I was in my crib asleep, there were people downtown in the state office buildings and in the Capitol. They were planning this whole project. I mean, this is not a new project. This was planned decades ago. They had a plan back in the 1950s that they would eventually take over the Indiana Avenue area, and they would expand the IUPUI campus. And at that time period, my mother was taking courses at the Indiana University Extension. I think it was on Delaware. And she was told during one class period that they were going to build one small building near the Lockfield Gardens so that the Indiana University Extension students would be able to maybe take classes there. That one building has now metastasized into an entire university complex, and we have nothing. We have been totally erased. Our rich and vibrant history has been erased from the annals of human history, and we're just a forgotten people. And it's just so sad to me as someone who was born and raised on the Avenue, for me to see it in my lifetime, it just makes me so sad. It's so sad. And if we could just talk about just the history, that history dates back to the early 1900s. And I've spoken to Paul about the fact that my latest book is called The History of African Americans in Indianapolis, 1820 to 1970. The history of a people determined to be free. I go back to the 1820s, and I have a 150-year history of many of the events that occurred that were reported, and some that were purposely omitted from the annals of history because they were too embarrassing, and the pain was too excruciating. So I wanted to let you know that book will be out next year on Indiana University Press, and I was surprised that they decided to print it because I'm very not nice to IUPUI and what they've done to us. But IU Press, they got the courage to print it, and that's on them. I cannot tell a lie. I have to tell the truth.
Well, you've been doing important work on jazz on Indianapolis Avenue, rhythm and blues on Indianapolis Avenue, this 150-year history. I want to open it up to the three of our final panelists for any final comments. But I don't want to end this conversation yet, because this is our last panel, and I want to bring in our audience and our attendees to ask you all some questions, if you all are open to that, for another 5 or so minutes. Would you be willing?
Can I make just one quick statement before?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, all right. One of the subtitles of my book, the latest book, is that be careful with whom you share the responsibility to write your history, for he or she may record 100 lives that will last 1,000 seasons. So it's very, very important that we write our history and that we get it right, and not let anyone else, outside our community with no knowledge of our rich history, to record that history.
No,
so that's a statement I want to make. Mm-hmm.
No, I think that's so important. And I think that all of us here tonight are about recording, deploying, archiving, Black history here in Indiana, across the country, both history of the most fabulous and spectacular events, but also history of everyday memories, history of everyday stories that are usually not recorded. And so I know there are folks in attendees, if you want to go in and type into the question and answer spot, or if you want to put other things in. I have a question as we wait to hear from some folks from the audience. How do we, I want to start with you, Ms. Brooks, how do we push back against IUPUI? You know, and I know, like, you know, IUPUI is everywhere. You know, they are hosting this webinar tonight.
They're your employer.
You know, they paid my paycheck. So, you know, but how do we push back? You know, right now we saw your newspaper article early this week. What do we do? How do we organize, both as a larger group? We have politicians here, and just for everyday folks. How do we push back?
Well, you know, fortunately, the announcement of this development has actually opened up that opportunity. I believe the university just does not know what to do, so they do nothing. The Office of Community Affairs, or neighborhoods and communities, I think the name changed, but Dr. Matada's office, and
Yes.
Amy Warner is the vice chancellor.
Yes.
I have excellent relationships with them, but institutionally, none of their resources have been deployed right here in this area. The resources are deployed in Hallville, Martindale, Brightwood, up in Riverside, and I actually think it's because they don't know what to do. Now, we have an opportunity right now. The university has indicated that there's a possibility of establishing a reconciliation commission. And I think that that would be very helpful, just so we could discuss publicly what happened and give IUPUI an opportunity for atonement, because that has not happened at all. They're still grabbing land, as much land as they can around here. The behavior has not stopped. Using private entities to infiltrate, that has not stopped. That needs to be confronted. I just think that in terms of that, and also the public, again, the population, we have to demand that, and we're not demanding that. We're satisfied with a scholarship. That recent initiative with Dr. Dace's office, the diversity initiative, well, we weren't even consulted on what what was it, plaques, a video, and a scholarship. That's nothing. You know, that's really easy. So we really need real talk and real solutions, and hopefully that'll happen soon. I think that's what we need.
No, that's
Justin, I was gonna jump in to say that an important part of this conversation is we have to also look into the future and see kind of what's motivating people to have kind of a future Black community in Indianapolis, and to like enter that question and that possibility and talk about what that is and what it looks like, and that Black people should have a future at Indiana Avenue, right? And in downtown Indianapolis, and with all of the investment, with the heart of our economy, our future economies, our creative economies, all of these young people that got together and sort of in a short period of time kind of recreated this space and created business opportunities and social and cultural connection and life. That is what makes the city great, right? And Black people did that, just like Black people did that, you know, in the heyday of Indiana Avenue. And Indianapolis needs it. All of Indianapolis needs it to survive.
All of
right?
Is connected to voting, as we've been talking about all evening long, that we need to have our voices heard. We need to have representatives in place. We need to show up at every level of government, from neighborhood associations to block captains to Congress folks and senators and governors, right? We need to be everywhere. And I mean, the comments are popping up in the chat from Ms. Moore was talking about that the Indiana Recorder has an archive that folks can check out on the history of our neighborhoods and the history of contributions. Yes, Folks are asking, are we taping this? We are taping this. We are going to make this available to our other members and to anyone else who wants to hear about this amazing treasure trove of information that we've been going through all night. And also, finally, some folks were talking about we got to continue to say their names. I mean, I always appreciate that was Nichelle Hayes who was saying, for the Center for Literature and Black Culture at the Indianapolis Public Library, we've got to write these books. We got to check out these books. We've got to talk about these books, right? Create panels and sessions and meetings so that our kids and our grandkids read these books. I really want to thank folks. I want to give, if anybody on this panel, I know we started a few minutes late and we're running late, but if anybody on this panel wants to make a final comment before we close out tonight, I want to give you all that opportunity. I want to encourage folks. I'm going to ask folks to donate and support to all of the organizations that have presented tonight, but also to ASALH, the organization that's been sponsoring this evening tonight. We want folks to donate because we are out there, we're agitating, we're out there, we're trying to do the work of galvanizing history makers, cultural builders, the folks who are repairing the breach between our neighborhoods and our community. We're working, and so I'm gonna drop in this link. You can donate on the front page of our website, and I'll put in another link in a minute so that everyone can see that as well. But please, Paula or David or Justin, did you want to give one last comment before we close out for the
Yes,
evening?
I would like to give a last comment in the form of a plea.
Yes.
Yeah, I have been collecting Indiana Avenue rare artifacts that date from 1861, the first African-American identifiable business on the avenue, up until the 2020. So, and I've been having this in my garage and in public storage, paying big money to store this. And I'm hoping that maybe in the near future, maybe the next month or so, we could have a structure here in Indianapolis where we can display a lot of Indiana Avenue artifacts. I have the music from the 1920s, photographs, advertisement posters, sheet musics, video tapes, audio tapes of people who I interviewed during my first two books. And if I can't find a resource place to store this, then I'm just going to get rid of it, and that's going to be history lost that could be never be recovered. So I spoke to Brandon Cosby about 2 Martin Luther King days ago, and we were supposed to get together, but I'm hoping he'll be able to contact me so we can talk about having some type of Indiana Avenue museum with many of my artifacts.
Yes. I mean, and people are chatting it up on the chat saying we have Susan Hall Dotson, who is the African American coordinator and archivist at the Indiana Historical Society. We have Keisha Tandy, who was on the call on the Zoom meeting earlier this evening at the Indiana State Museum. We've got to do this. Brandon is saying, let's do it next week. Let's meet. The folks. Some folks were saying, remind folks to call the walker and to complain and to agitate and to make our voices heard. Call IUPUI, ask to speak to Amy Warner and the Chancellor's office, Peter Nasser, to say that we are not happy and we're not going to be okay with IUPUI acting and continuing to agitate in the way that they have. I'm going to give the last word really here to Ms. Brooks for the work that you've been doing, for the way that you brought us together and you really amplified this issue this week. And at the last few meetings of the commissions that have been talking and meeting, what do you have to say to us as we've kind of had a full evening? What would you say to us?
I would like your support. I would like for you to, as you had just said, Professor Edmonds, to contact Amy Warner, Chancellor Padar, Mayor Hossett, Vop, Buckingham, and tell them no. The Walker board just flat out no, we do not want this. We want the Indiana Avenue with Blackness. We don't want Indiana Avenue to be another Mass Avenue, which is the plan. We can define what Indiana Avenue can mean to the Black community, and now's the time. So we need everybody to answer our call to action and take action.
Yeah.
And also next week, we're planning, the Reclaim Indiana Avenue Coalition is planning a follow-up to our first town hall that was held last Thursday, where Buckingham, the developer, presented its plans. So we're also asking people to join us next Wednesday at 7 p.m. on Facebook at Indiana Avenue Now or Never for a community conversation on some of the issues that were brought up on Thursday, and also for the community, because this is a community effort. It's not that we want someone in a back room to make this decision. We want the entire community to make the decision of what the future Indiana Avenue could look like.
Thank you so much. I want to, this has been an amazing evening. I really want to thank everyone who has joined us tonight. I want to thank our sponsors. I'm going to ask our tech support person to bring Ms. Joyce Moore and Ms. Roz Shropshire back onto the main screen. But I want to thank, first of all of our honorees for tonight. I want to thank, first of all, Alicia Johnson, the IPS superintendent. I want to thank Brandon Cosby, the executive director of the Flanner House. And I want to thank Virginia Kane, the Marion County Director of Public Health, for their commitment and compassion to Indianapolis and to Indianapolis communities, specifically Black communities and communities of color. I also want to thank the Indiana 10, the Black Lives Matter movement. They have been here in spirit and in every conversation that we've had tonight, really, that they flowed through. And we want to thank them. They're out doing the work right now, right? So they told us they would probably not be able to join us. We understand that. We said, don't worry about coming to pick up award tonight. We've got your back. We've got you covered. We're going to be with you. We know that we've got both the elders and the new folks and the folks that are working on all these different levels doing the work. And so I thank you. So I want to thank Roz Shropshire, Ophelia Wellington, and Tim Reed from our first panel that gave us the historical context. I want to thank Brandon Cosby and Miss Joyce Moore, who talked about Black Lives Matter and kind of brought us into a larger conversation about that. I want to thank our state legislators who came in, Senator Jean Breaux, Representative Cherish Pryor, and Representative Vernon Smith, for coming and educating us about what and how we can get involved and the long history of Black involvement here in the state. And I want to thank this last group that's really brought it home to an issue that we're dealing with right now this week, and folks on this call have been working on this for a long time. I've known Professor Williams for a while. His work and his passion are evident in everything that he does. I'm just meeting Justin Moore, and I thank you so much for your commitment and your connection to this work, for both that as an Indianapolis native, but also from afar. He's dialing in from New York City tonight. And then I want to thank Ms. Paula Brooks. I really, want to highlight how beautiful it is and wonderful to have someone who does the work on the ground, who is tireless, who shows up both in print and when no one is around to take with a camera or anything else to give you credit. You're doing the work, and that's what we need. That energizes us. And I'm so thankful that you were here, that you're doing your work. And I want you to know, please call us. Please let us know where we need to be. We want to show up and be there with you, for you, and support you, and really work with you in any way that we can.